All right. Hope you're all having a good day today. Last session of the day. Try to keep it interesting. All right. So I'm using Google Slides today, which means we have Q&A. So in addition to the Slack channel, there's a link up there. You can go to it on your phone. You can ask me questions as we're going. So whether you're in here or in the other theater, if I see those pop up, we can try to get to them as we go. Or if you're in the theater, you can raise your hand as well. So my name is John Kruger. I'm a manager at a company called York Risk Services Group. And this is our story of how we became a remote working team and how the experience went for us. So there's no silver bullets or panaceas, and working from home is not one of them either. But we discovered that something that worked very well for us, and maybe it will work for you as well. So here we go. So where do you go when you need to get work done? So when you ask people where they go to get work done, very few people are going to say the office. For those of us that are in the office, a lot of times people, try to get in early or stay late because that's when they can actually get something done. They don't have meetings and they don't have distractions, or they'll go take their laptop and go hide somewhere so that nobody can bother them. So offices are turning into interruption factories. We have tons of meetings, we have drive-bys, we have conversations. There's a lot of things to distract you. And while a lot of this stuff is good, creative work like software development requires long periods of uninterrupted time to focus. And that's exactly the opposite of what we tend to get at the office. So a little bit about us. So like I said, I work for a company called York. It's a large company. We have 5,500 people. It's a national company. We have offices all over the country. We don't have IT in all these offices, but our users are spread out all over the place. We have a lot of meetings over conference calls as a result, and things like that. We are a third-party administrator for handling commercial insurance claims. We do not have beanbag chairs and foosball tables and beer kegs. We are traditional corporate America. So there's really nothing super special about us. We have a lot of people working in a lot of places. This is our team. The team came together in the last year. We were all new to the company. We had a greenfield project, so we had a new code base. We had no process defined because we were all new to each other. About 4 months into it, the project got canceled, so that was interesting. So we've had a lot of adversity, but a lot of us say this is one of our favorite teams that we've worked on, and I've been working for 20 so years. So unfortunately, we were going along and everything was going great, and I took over second project, and half my team came with me, so the team got split up. So ironically, half of the team, including myself, are back working in the office again with a different team. But the other half is still working from home, so it's kind of weird, to be honest, I'm giving a talk about working from home, and by the way, I don't work from home, but at least some of my people are. I really miss it a lot, so so this is just a story about our experiences. So the whole working from home thing for us was sort of a happy accident. We never set out to do this. I didn't think it would happen. People would work from home for the typical reasons like, I'm feeling sick today, or like the plumber's coming to fix something and things like that. I have one-on-ones with, all the people on the team. And, I kept hearing from different developers saying things like, yeah, that day I worked from home, I got a ton of stuff done, and it was great. So then one morning, I was getting ready to come to work, and I look on Slack, and like the power is out at our office. So they're like, well, everybody work from home today because we have no internet. Don't come in. So we're like, okay, let's see how this works. So, we're all working at home. We all have to try to figure out how this happens. We all have to have stand up, and we have to do our daily meetings and our things that we do. And it went really well. So I'm like, okay, well, what if we try, let's just try work from home Fridays. So I had one stipulation, and that was we need to communicate just as well at home as we would, or just as well at home as we would in the office. So you can't say things like, oh yeah, we'll just talk about it tomorrow when we're in the office, or anything like that. Like if you need to talk to somebody, get on the phone, get on Slack, get on a Google Hangout, whatever you have to do to get it done. So we did that. It went really well. We do our retros, work from home always was one of the more positive things that was continually brought up. So okay, well, what if we try Mondays and Fridays? So we did that, and then it's like, okay, well, let's just do the week after Christmas because like half the people were out and like people had their kids at home. So like, let's just try that. So eventually it's kind of like, well, like we keep liking this. Maybe we should just do this. So what we ended up with was 4 days a week. We didn't want to completely leave the office. So our whole team, like obviously we all work in the same city. We're all in Columbus. So we did want to see each other. The one day in the office, we did a lot of like all our sprint planning and our retros and a lot of things like that. Or like if you need to do some tech design, it was a good time to do that. If you just need to be together to draw on a whiteboard. So that's what we did. It lasted for about a month and a half before the split. The rest of the guys are still going, doing the 4 days a week thing. It gave people a lot of flexibility. One guy, he lives in Columbus, his girlfriend's in Detroit, so, he would take off sometime Thursday, Friday, go up there, hang out with her and stay at her place and just work from there and then, come back down for Wednesdays and things like that. One guy didn't really like working from home because he liked the separation of home and work, so he would come into the office to use his desk and everything there. So it gave people flexibility. I have a guy that's on a different team that reports to me. He's living in Louisiana. He just decided he wanted to move to Washington State just because he thought it sounded cool, so he did. Our team, we still met for lunch a lot. It's one of the benefits of like doing remote work, but being local is that we can still like, in addition to the Wednesdays in the office, we'd get together for lunch. Just whoever could make it, just for fun. We got to go to different sides of town because based on where people lived. One thing that was really interesting that I did not expect. We were all talking about this the other day, and one guy mentioned how once he started working from home, he started caring a lot more about the project. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And it was, he was saying like when you go to work, you generally, typically most of us work the same hours, 8 to 5 or whatever it is for you, and you put your butt in the seat and you do your work, and then you go home, and it's like, well, I'm good. Whatever I get done today, I get home. Well, when you're at home, it's a little different because it's like I don't know what it is. Maybe you want to like prove that it's working so you can keep doing it. But when you're at home, like nobody can see you just sitting at the computer typing so that they can just assume that you're working. So it becomes a lot more about results. Like, are we actually like getting things done? Am I checking code in? Am I like moving tickets across the board and that sort of thing? So it becomes a lot more results oriented. But I didn't really realize how much it would affect people's motivation. All right, so what this really gives you is a lot of freedom, which I call the new luxury. So why do we like money? Well, it's because money gives us the freedom to get the things we want and do the things that we want. Remote working gives you a freedom that money can't buy, meaning that you can work where or when you want. So, for example, my guy that moved from Louisiana to Washington State, or the guy who went up to Detroit for his girlfriend, it gives you freedom to do that. You can work in your office, you can work in your house, you can work at the coffee shop. One guy works at a co-working space. Some people get crazy and they want to do some traveling. So they'll go to Colorado for 6 months or whatever they want. Or I don't know if you guys follow Rob Connery's blog. He lived in Hawaii, which I think is pretty good, but he packed up and just sort of toured the world for a year with his family and worked wherever he was. Big one, no commuting. So I have a half hour to 45-minute commute every day. Some people have more than that or less, but that's a lot of time. And commuting, I have 3 kids, so people would say, oh yeah, being in the car by yourself is nice and peaceful, but driving just is not that peaceful. I don't care what they say. If you're like me and you have a family, if you get to see your family during the day, I could eat lunch with them or just stop by and say hi. It really helped my wife out so we homeschool our kids, but part of that is they go to all these extracurricular classes and stuff, so she's constantly driving people to that or taking kids to the dentist, and she can just leave the rest of them home. So I think she misses it the most now that I'm back in the office because it was a huge work-life balance thing for her. And you have flexibility to work different hours. You know, like a lot of developers like are night owls, and they'd rather work at 11 p.m. So this sort of gives people the flexibility to do that. Now, we sort of had, you know, core hours where we all sort of agreed to be online. Like, I mean, you could go off, you know, take a break and stuff, but generally we were on during the normal 9 to 4 time period. But, you know, a lot of people weren't, you know, they're working like strange hours just because that's what they like to do. For me, like, more free time is such a huge deal. So, like I said, with my commute, I spend 6 hours a week in the car. So when I had to go back to working in the office, dude, it was crushing, thinking, like, where in the world am I going to find, like, 6 hours of time? So, you know, like I said, I have 3 kids. That's almost like having a second job. They're in activities and all this other stuff. So, like, I can't just come home and relax. It was really hard when, like, I get to the end of the week and I'm really worn down and I just don't have as much to give them, or I'm just really tired. And they notice that sort of thing. When I was in the office, like, not having the commuting and just having more time in general, like, you have a lot more energy. That, for me, was the biggest thing. That was a game changer. You know, you could run your laundry during the day, so, like, at night you don't have to do that stuff, so at night you can do more of the things you want to do. So this is a free perk that you can give your people that has numerous benefits, that it doesn't really cost the company anything. If anything, like, they're not paying for the office space. Like, our company we actually do have a remote working policy, even though most people in the company work in an office, but, you know, office space is expensive, so they're trying to get some people to work from home more. But this is something that's hard to find in most employers. Most employers are not really into this sort of thing, not really open to it. So this focused work is a huge thing for developers. Like I was saying, like, for creative work, this is essential. Like, we need more time to be able to focus on things like, you know, writing code, for example, because that's what we're getting paid to do. I found that, like, if I had an hour block in my calendar that was free, I was pretty sure I was going to get to focus on what I wanted for an hour. Now, somebody might call me up. Slack was constantly going off, but it's interesting how, like, if you're at work and someone comes up and taps you on the shoulder, like, it's never 5 seconds. It always seems to be like a few minutes, and that really gets you out of your zone. Like, you can switch over to Slack, like, look at a few messages, respond real quick, and switch back and not get out of that zone you were in. So I was able to really focus a lot better. We tended to have fewer meetings, and when we did, they were more focused meetings. Like, there's just a tendency when you're in a physical meeting room with people that there's just a lot of just random chit-chat, or just, you know, like, yeah, we're talking about these topics at the meeting, but it gets a little off track. Like, when you're working from home, that I just found, like, when you're on the phone, that tends to not happen as much. A lot more things got decided on Slack because that was our primary mode of communication. Obviously, phone calls, video conferencing was a thing, but we do a lot on Slack, which is nice because now you have a record of it. And like I said, you just have long periods of uninterrupted time. I mean, I'm a manager. I tend to have more meetings than the average dev. So, you know, for a dev, if they only have like 2 meetings in a day, I mean, that's a long time they have just to do what they want. So think about it. Imagine this theoretical project out there was going on. So let's say that the people rarely met in person, if ever. So when we met, we were getting together 1 day a week, sometimes more. What if we never met? What if we were actually all over the world instead of all in Columbus, Ohio? What if we had thousands of developers on our team contributing to the same code base? What if we hardly ever talked on the phone? What if people worked inconsistent hours? I mean, not only in different time zones, like some people might work 8 hours a day, and some people might work 30 minutes, and some people might say they're going to work 4 hours and not at all, and no one's getting paid. How in the world would this ever work? There's no way this would work. And this is how all open source projects work. How many of you use Linux and Ruby and Node and jQuery and React and any other number of open source things that are out there? And big corporate America relies on all these things that are built in this manner. So this is completely counterintuitive to a lot of the old management theories. Especially, when you think nobody's getting paid, like, why is anybody going to care about this? So this is the key. So this is not just about working from home, because in order to do that, you need to get to a certain place. And a lot of this goes back to intrinsic motivation. So I'll talk a little bit about management style, and a lot of this is just my thoughts on things, but I think it's played well with the working from home. So intrinsic motivation. The old management styles, like offering people rewards for getting things done, or managing with fear, or dangling carrots and sticks, those have been proven in research to not work well with creative knowledge work. So obviously, like, money matters to a point, like we all know that, like we all want to get paid a fair wage. But, once we're cool with the money thing, now this other stuff takes over. What people really want is autonomy, they want mastery, and they want purpose. So autonomy, you want to be able to do things the way that you feel is best. You want mastery, you want to be able to do what you do well and succeed at it. And you want to have a purpose. You want to be doing something that's bigger than yourself. So I would rather hire smart people and empower them and then set them loose to be awesome and do great things. Show the value of what it is that we're working on as a team. When people see that, like, we're doing more than just writing code, like we're changing the way somebody does something, even if it's just changing the way that, like, an underwriter, like, rates a policy, like, that's a big deal to those people. When you do that, like, people will start to develop a sense of urgency on their own. So I worked for a manager who was really good at this. So I'd sit in a meeting with him, and I'd walk out of that meeting, and you'd feel this crushing weight of, like, wow, we got to get this work done tomorrow. And, like, we'd have, like, 6 months to go. But, like, he was good at, like, showing just the immense value of what it is that we were doing and how important it was to the company or to, people in the company. And it really motivated you to do that. So if you can get people to feel that, like, self-motivation is the most powerful form of motivation. Like, as a leader, we can provide fuel for that fire. But think about all the excuses about, what people think about people working at home, like they're going to slack off or be lazy. If you have an intrinsically motivated person, you don't have to worry about that. In fact, you're going to have to worry about some different things, which I'll talk about in a minute. So for me, like, we work in a results-oriented business, whether we like it or not. I believe in process because it helps us achieve results better. I believe in writing unit tests or automated testing because I believe that it helps us to have more maintainable code, which helps us to change things faster and get things done better. But ultimately, it comes down to results. So when people, like, the number one question I would get with people when I tell them that, oh yeah, we're working from home, it's like, well, how do you know your people are working? Well, because I see tickets moving in Jira, I see code getting checked in, I see functionality in the app, I see people talking on Slack about what they're doing, they talk about it in stand-up. There's a myriad of reasons I can see the results happening. No limits. I want people to feel like there's no limit to the amount of impact they can make. I don't want them to feel encumbered by just processes or the business, just difficult things in the corporate environment, or having to come into the office. If they work better at home, then I want them to work at home. I want to trust people. I don't want to be a micromanager. If you can't trust people, if you don't trust people, you're going to have a difficult time. And that applies whether you're working at home or in the office. I would rather find people that I can trust. And if there's a gap there, let's talk through it and figure out how we can get there and how we can all get on the same page. Having people working together, so not having any silos, especially if you're working from home. You don't want people to get isolated, just sort of going off and, like, you don't know what they're doing. You don't want to have single points of failure, or, like, what if somebody just, like, makes a bad design decision and goes down a rabbit hole. So if you have people working together, they're keeping each other in check and working through design together, that sort of thing. Keeps people from getting hung out to dry. So we would try to assign multiple people to work on something. So work item trackers don't really help with this because there's, like, a field for a person that's assigned to something. So, I mean, that's fine, but we would try to, say like, hey, for this set of functionality, these 2 or 3 people are working on it. And then they decide how they divvy up the work. People could pair up. They could just work on separate things and sort of review it. But I wanted everybody to have a shared understanding of what their little group was doing. You got to have clear expectations with people. Again, this matters even if you're in the office, but especially at home. Like one of the things that we came up with was, like if we were generally going to be around during these core hours, and if we're not, like update your status in Slack. There's nothing worse than when it's 12:30 and you Slack somebody and you ask them a question and you don't get a response and you don't know, like, well, they're at lunch or maybe they're just not checking. Well, should I call them? Well, I don't want to call them if they're at lunch. So we just made sure we kept our status up to date. For me, the whole we can't have any of this, let's wait till tomorrow when I'm in the office, because tomorrow we probably weren't going to be in the office anyways. Stop being a control freak. If you're a manager, there's most managers are not bad at this, but there's some that are. Like if you feel like you have to have everything approved and reviewed by you, you're probably not trusting your people. There's managers that get a good feeling from just looking out over the cubicle walls and like seeing all the butts and seats and people typing as if like things are magically happening when that happens. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But again, like if you're not trusting people, like it's just not going to be a good environment for you or for the developers in the team or anybody really. One-on-ones are really important just because like if you don't have the hallway conversations, so you got to make sure like you're keeping up with everybody. And honestly, this is how I found out about, had the idea of working from home in the first place, is having one-on-ones with people and hearing how their experiences went. Periodically checking the questions here. We will, I'll get to some of these at the end. All right, so good people matter. I want people that are self-motivated, responsible, don't need babysitting or hand-holding. Again, this applies whether you're working in the office or at home. And, I think as a manager, I could hopefully do a lot to help with this stuff. I hope I can create an environment where people are self-motivated and care enough to be responsible and, don't need babysitting. But obviously, like good people make a huge difference on any team. And I think when you're working from home, it's even magnified even more that good people get even better. Communication is really important. Slack was our primary mode of communication. If you don't use Slack, you use something else, that's fine, but we love Slack. You can put your status in there, say I'm out to lunch. You can mute all the notifications, so if you're sleeping in and you're not going to show up till 9:30 or 10 and you don't want your phone blowing up, like you can turn off the notifications. You have a lot of control over those kind of settings. You can make separate channels for side conversations, which we started doing a lot of. If you have your main general channel, you'll find that that's going to get cluttered up real fast just because there's so much chatter. You need to split it up. But Slack was great. Phone calls, were obviously really important. If you need to talk to someone, just pick up the phone and get on the phone. Like, that's why we have phones. Some days I'd spend half my day on the phone, even when I was working at home. Video conferencing is a big deal. We at least try to do all our stand-ups with video conferencing so we can see each other's faces. Some meetings we would, some meetings we wouldn't. We'd pair up over screen sharing. This is one of the things that's really improved over the years. The technology has gotten a lot better. Home internet now costs a lot less, so we all have like crazy internet speeds now, which most developers tend to have that thing anyways. So that went really well for us. Keeping your work item tracking system up to date. This is even more important than when you're in the office. Like, you got to move your tickets so we can see the status of what's going on. Good code and good process is really important. So, well, first of all, like when we started out, like I said, we were a new team. We were not very good. We had a new code base. We had no process. We had to define our process, and we'd never worked together. All that happened while we were in the office. So I started last May. We really started the work from home in December. So there's a 6-month period in the office. And while we were there, we nailed down a lot of things. Obviously, there's teams there's remote working companies that just do everything remote. People are all over the world. they find a way to make it work. I'd be curious to hear from those people because I'm sure you have stories on how you made it work. For us, I think it was really helpful that we did that in the office, but obviously it doesn't have to work that way. It helps if your patterns in your code are mostly well-defined, so there's not a lot of nebulous features you need to build. Obviously, you want good requirements, but just, you pick up a ticket and you say, okay, I know I need to make these kinds of classes and write these kinds of tests and do these kinds of things, and that's general shared knowledge that everybody has, and hopefully it's could be documented as well. Your team processes should be working well, like everybody understands. So we do a Scrum-based Agile. Everybody should understand the sprint cadence and that, hey, things aren't done until it's QA tested, and if QA is blocked because the system's broken, that's highest priority to jump in and fix it. Things like that. It really helps to nail that down. And, shared understanding of how to do things just across the board, whether it's code, process, communication, that sort of thing. So a lot of people have seen this sort of progression of a team from storming to forming to norming and performing. We went through this whole thing. I think there's a sweet spot for it. I think working from home sort of magnifies things, whether they're good or bad. If we had done this early on, it would have been really challenging because we didn't have our process defined. We didn't have our code patterns very well defined. We didn't know each other very well. We didn't know each other's personalities and how we like to work. If you did it in that middle stage, I think you could do it. I think it might be it'd take a while to get there. It might be a rockier road. But when you get to the end, I think that was the sweet spot. And that's sort of when we started doing it, is we got to the end of the norming phase. And then once you're sort of a well-oiled machine, the machine just runs a lot better. You become a lot more productive. Things go well. If we had started working from home full-time earlier on in the process, I think we would have had some challenges, and it would have been a little frustrating. So like I said, this is not a panacea. We accepted that there's certain trade-offs. When we did this, there's certain challenges that are going to come with it. So having most people in the office is difficult. Again, if you have one guy working from home because his kid is sick and he had to stay home, it's real easy to have the conversation in your little aisle and forget to include that person. So now he comes into the office next day and he doesn't know what happened. It's just real easy to forget the people working from home and for them to sort of forget about everybody else. If you have ever been the person working from home and the rest of the team's in a conference room and you're trying to call in, even if you have the phones with the little satellites, it's still just so hard to hear, and it's just it's almost so hard you can't follow it. So that's a challenge. One thing we started doing is, since we were doing the one day in the office, we found that when we were doing the one day in the office, we were having a lot more conversation on Slack because it included everybody. And it didn't interrupt people that were sort of in the zone. And we were just sort of used to doing it that way. And sometimes, as developers, just our personalities, we sort of like to communicate that way. It gives you time to think about it as opposed to having to think on your feet. You have those people that are they like to talk a lot. They're very well spoken. They think fast. But they tend to dominate the design discussions where the quiet guy who has good ideas never gets a word in. If you do it on Slack, it's easier. Communicating well is obviously really important, and it's really easy to turn around in your chair and talk to somebody. You just got to be very proactive about it, making sure that you're keeping up with people, calling people when you need to. You might have people in different time zones. We haven't had to deal with this yet, but we're about to deal with it. We're going to get some people in California. So this is a bigger challenge because they might not be starting work till 11 Eastern time. So, when do you do stand-up? Or, you're really only working together for, 3-4 hours a day. The whole let's wait until we're in the office thing that I talked about. Some people like the office. This isn't for everybody. There's some people that don't like working from home, or they just really don't like all the distractions, or they want to get out of the house, or their family's annoying, or just any number of things. There's legitimate reasons why people wouldn't want to do this. Isolation, I was really worried about this. I'm very much a people person. I like seeing people around and stuff. But I think we had the camaraderie from before we started doing it, which really helped. So I'm keeping up with people all the time. Part of that's my job as a manager. I'm doing one-on-ones with people. We're talking on the phone. We're talking on Slack. We're going to lunch. So I felt like I still had that connection. Like I'm still communicating with people even though I don't like see their face the whole day that I'm talking to them. The one day a week in the office worked really well. For your team, like that might be different. Maybe it's 3 days in the office works really well. Like that was the balance that worked for us. But then we did have some weeks that due to weather or whatever, like we had 5 days at home, and we've done everything at home. We've done all our sprint planning and retros at home, and we were able to make it work. You can also go to a coffee shop or a co-working space if that's your thing. I have one guy that goes to a co-working space every day and rents a desk because he likes it, and he likes the beer kegs and the random stuff they have. You don't have the hallway conversations, which can be a distraction, but at the same time, it's really nice to like just be able to chat with people and get involved in their lives and say, hey, how was your weekend, and that sort of thing. So like you do lose a bit of camaraderie. You have to work at it a bit more. I think maybe we should have like met up more outside of work, like try to meet for lunch more as a team or happy hours, that sort of thing. There's no separation between work and home. So, some people deal with this better than others, but for some people it's like hard to turn their work mind off and switch over. For me, I had an office that's like in the corner of my house, so it was a little easier because like I just turned my computer off and closed the door and go downstairs, and now I'm with my kids, so it's like I just commuted home, but I just, it took 5 seconds. Overworking. So the irony is that I'm not worried about people slacking at home. I'm worried that they're working too much. I've had to tell several people this actually, because like it's motivating and it's fun. You have more energy. Like when I go to the office, like I usually leave around 7:30 and I usually get home around 5:30. So when I was working at home, I sometimes would just tend to work the exact same hours. So I replace the commuting hours with working. Or, again, you have the flexibility to work at night, but then, like maybe it's midnight and then it's 1 and then it's 2:30 and you should be going to bed, right, Tony? And but you just keep going. So it's harder to see when people are struggling because you can't you don't necessarily see that. But you find out, you hear about it. Other people at your company. Your boss may not be a big fan of this. You may have jealous coworkers that, they go to their boss and say, hey, why can't I work from home? And then their boss doesn't like it. Or HR might say, well, we don't have a process for that, To me, results matter, and that's the only thing that matters. So, I've gotten slight amounts of grief from various people in the company, and I've just laid in the road and said, look, you pay me to get results, and if I'm not getting the results, you're going to hold me accountable. Therefore, if this isn't working, I'm motivated to just tell everybody, look, we're going back to the office. This isn't working, but it was working, and they can see the results. So there's various excuses that you might get or might be thinking yourself. Magic only happens when we're all in the room. We can all think of times where we were together in the office and we had a big brainstorming session and amazing things happened and it was great. Working from home doesn't mean you can't still communicate and you can't still have that happen. And again, it works for open source. Open source obviously does great things out there in the world. They build way more complicated systems than anything that we build, and they do a good job of it. People slack off. To me, this happens more in the office. How many times do people sit and just talk about video games for half an hour? Or how many times do you have an hour meeting that really should have just been 40 minutes, but everybody just sits around and shoots the breeze for a while? And again, I'm not saying that that stuff's all bad, because it's good to have camaraderie and be involved in people's lives. That's part of building a culture of camaraderie, and that stuff is really important. And then there's also, if you can't trust your people, why do you have them, whether they're in the office or at home? Homes are full of distractions. Well, this is true, and for some people, this is a really big deal. I find that the office is full of distractions. I find that the flexibility is good. It's much easier for me to find work time because I'm not commuting. If I want to work at night, like I can. If, I just have more free time in general because I'm not commuting, and I can like sort of do the laundry during the, run the laundry loads during the day, things like that. We might lose our culture. This is a concern. Like, you want to be aware of this one. Having that for us, having the prior relationships really helped. I think it helped to keep the culture of the team because it was the same people doing the same things, just in a different place. We still kind of hung out and talked a lot. Having the one day in the office really helped with that. Meeting up for lunch or breakfast or happy hours really helps with that. You really should be aware of this, and if you start working from home, like, you got to keep your finger on the pulse of this. And, if you don't know, if you can't figure it out, like, just ask your people. Or one thing I like to do is send out anonymous surveys on SurveyMonkey, because then people, will give honest feedback, but it's all aggregated, so I don't know what people are thinking. But, like, you do that every month, and now I have a trend. Like, okay, are things getting better? Are they getting worse? You can sort of measure things that way. Oh, and others might get jealous. I have very little patience for this one because, again, like I said, results matter. Like, this happened, at our company where, like, other people on other teams started going to ask their boss, like, hey, are we going to have a work from home policy? And, like, their bosses said no, and they didn't really like that, but that's how it was. I said, well, maybe these other managers need to consider if they should give their team the same level of flexibility and trust and autonomy that our team was getting, and maybe they'd get the same results that we did. But this is a thing. So what do you do? What can be your next steps if you think you might want to try something like this? Consistency in communication and process. Again, like, is your process well defined and well understood? Is your code base well defined and well understood? I mean, you can have a messy code base and legacy code, that's fine, but, like, do people generally know how to work in it? Start defining that stuff now and getting that nailed down. And even if you don't go working from home, you're still going to reap the benefits of that. Start acting like a remote team. If you have work from home workers, make sure they're calling in for stand-up, or even better, like having a video chat, or, when you're doing meetings, do a video chat. Have conversations on Slack, even though you're sitting 10 feet from each other. As weird as that sounds, like, it really does help because it allows people to stay focused and decide if they want to be in the conversation or not. It doesn't bother the people around you. Implement some kind of, like, no distractions time. I've seen a lot of teams do this where they say, okay, between, like, 1 and 3, like, nobody's allowed to talk. Or, between 1 and 3, you can only communicate on Slack. Or if, I've seen one place they have, like, a big stick attached to the cubes and they put a red cup on the top if, like, they don't want to be bothered. Or for some people, like, the headphones on is a sign of, like, I don't want to be bothered. But just trying to give your developers, like, freedom to focus. Or another thing is, like, if even at the very beginning, I was telling people, like, look, if you need to get something done and you need a whole day to focus, because sometimes some development you need that, like, just go do it at home and just sit there for 8 hours a day. Don't call into meetings and just crush it, because you need that to do that kind of stuff. Try a work from home day. This is how we got started. Or just pick a day and say, we're all going to work from home today. We're going to try to do everything the right way, and then we're going to come back in the office and we're going to talk about it and see what worked and what didn't, and see if we want to do it anymore. Or maybe try one day a week, say we're doing work from home Fridays, and everybody does that. Talk about how it's going. Again, this is very important. Like, make sure everybody's heard. If you make a change like this, there might be some people that it just doesn't work. And every team's different. I feel like it mostly worked for our team. For some teams like this, you may not like it, and you want to go back in the office. And most people do retrospectives. If you do some kind of agile process, that was really helpful, and that's sort of how I got the feedback. That's sort of how I noticed, hey, this is working really well, in addition to, like, some people would always say, oh, I love the working from home, it's great. But, not everybody always says that, like, every day. Retro, you get some honest feedback about, like, what works and what's not working. So there was some of that, too. And just make sure you're addressing all the challenges that come along with that transition because you will have challenges. It's a big change, and it's a big adjustment for people. So some resources here. So our company recently switched to G Suite, so it's Google everything. We have our email is Gmail now, and we use Google Docs and Google Sheets and things like that. I honestly don't know how I worked for so long without like some kind of collaborative tool where like you could have multiple people editing the same document or spreadsheet live in real time. You know, most people are used to like emailing around copies of Excel spreadsheets and like trying to figure out who has the latest version of it and storing things on SharePoint. Like those days are gone. Like we don't use SharePoint anymore. Office 365 gives you stuff like this. These are just a massive deal. For our retrospectives, we started doing them in Google Sheets. We just set up 4 columns or however, for whatever columns we want of like what's working and what's not working or action items, whatever. And then people just sort of start typing and you just see it organically like showing up, which is kind of fun. It's easier to think of things that way for some reason than writing on sticky notes. You also have a record of it. You can go back and look at it. We like it so much that actually like when we're in the office and my new team that's in the office, like we use either Google Sheets or GoReflect is another tool that for doing these things online, and we just love it. So if your company doesn't have one of these things, like you all have Google accounts, so you can start using this stuff today, but it's a huge deal. You know, we had a lot of meetings where, you know, we shared out a Google Sheet and, you know, we have it up there and we're just talking through it and we're all like collaboratively editing it as we go and working on it. The tools are great. So I sound like a Google spokesperson, but they're awesome. Screen sharing is really important. Google Hangouts is a free one. There's lots of other ones out there, you know, WebEx or GoToMeeting. Here you go, video conferencing. Google Meet is like the G Suite version of Google Hangouts, but I don't really know what's different. Blue Jeans is another one people like. So pick your tool. Most of those cost money. Hangouts doesn't cost money. I haven't really noticed a difference in the quality of Hangouts versus some of the other ones. Some of the other ones have more functionality, like being able to record the presentation and some little nice to haves, I guess. Online whiteboards, like if you want to do like online like drawing on a whiteboard, we didn't really do this. We probably should have done more of it. So like if you just Google online whiteboards, there's a ton of tools out there, and the ones I looked at are all good at something and generally not good at something. So you can try them out and see what you like and see what works for you. Work item tracking, obviously, most people probably have this, but you need an online tool. You can't have a card wall and moving pieces of paper around. We like Jira. We've used it on several projects. Our whole company has historically been on TFS. We moved from TFS to Jira and sort of convinced the rest of the IT department to switch. So now like everybody's moving to Jira. It's just way easier to configure things without having to like edit XML files that we had to do with TFS. And just TFS, we were constantly fighting it. And it was bending our process in ways that we didn't like. Jira gives us more flexibility. There's cloud versions where you just pay per month, and then there's like a server version if like your company wants to install it locally. So you got options there. There's phone apps, all kinds of stuff. Faster high-speed internet at home. Most of you probably don't have this issue, but if you're going to do screen sharing, like you need more than the 5 meg down that we had back in the day. Something for instant messaging, Slack, HipChat, whatever it is that you want to use. Phone, email, like those are still obviously like very important. We still talk on the phone a lot. We still send a lot of emails just like everybody else does. All right, so survey results. So when you came in, you had a survey to take. Let's bring that up here. Which one is it? So I haven't seen this yet, so this will be interesting. All right, how often do you work remotely? Where's my mouse? Let me try to zoom in here. So the majority of you, 80%, said you just work from home whenever you're sick or the plumber's coming. Some of you did, one person did most of the time, and 5 people working all the time. Good for you. Does your IT department have remote work from home workers? Wow, a lot of people had, some people are remote, so that's interesting. But most people are still like co-located within one office. How interested are you in finding a work from home job on a scale of 1 to 10? So it looks like we have a mix. The average was 4. What aspects of remote working appeal to you the most? No commute, yes, definitely. Fewer distractions was number 2. Number 3, travel and live where you want, see family more free time. Some people actually prefer the office. And other. Can I see the other? Here we go. All right. Thanks, Survey Monkey. Jerk. Oh, here we go. Familiar, better desk setup, personal comfort, shorter work day, work during lunch, no commute. My wife was diagnosed with MS. This is a big deal. Like, this is real life stuff. Like, and I mean, we've had like people with health issues in their family. Flexible schedule. All right. If a potential job you were considering allowed you to work from home, how much would that impact your decision? So, a decent amount of you are only looking, well, 6 are only working for remote jobs. A lot of people would say it's a huge plus. So again, like it is challenging to find developers these days, at least in Columbus, but I think that's sort of a trend in other places too. It's really challenging to find people. If you have a perk like this that you can offer people, this is a big boost. I would fall in the it's a huge plus category if I were looking for a job, and you know, like if I wanted to work somewhere, let's say you're in downtown Columbus, that's at least like 45 minutes to an hour drive in traffic each way. Like that's prohibitive for me, like going to work somewhere like that. But if you say I can work from home, then I'd probably be a lot more interested. So keep that in mind, because I think that could be a big deal for people. That's it. All right, so let's go back to, where were we? Survey results. Hold on, I need the presenter view. This is really hard to do looking up at this. No, it's not. Oh, it might be down there, yeah. All right, we got some questions here. How do you handle mentoring developers? Well, I mean, you're still working together. So I think a lot of that can still happen. Like if it's like, hey, like I want to get better at testing. Like, can you show me how to do that? I mean, we can do that over screen sharing. We can do it in the one day in the office. We could decide like to go into the office an extra day to meet up and work on it. So I think like it's really not that different than when you're in the office. You're like everything's still on the table. For split workforces, part of the team is 100% remote, another part is 100% in the office. How do you protect yourself from inherent favoritism towards in-office workers, i.e. someone looking for opportunity X? We may naturally reach out to those physically closest to us. I was worried about this because when I started, like we were all in the same office, but I thought there was a strong possibility that we would get people that were in other cities. So that was sort of driving, like I didn't think we would start working from home this much, but we need to start getting better at dealing with remote workers. So again, like having conversations on Slack so that things are decided in that group. I think if we really had something like this where you have some people, a big group in the office and a big group remote, like you got to get a conference room outfitted with like serious video conferencing equipment where there's high quality video. Everybody has their own mic, so you don't have this, everybody trying to talk into a speakerphone. You need to make it so that the remote people feel just as much of a part of the team. I've seen teams that have people like this, and then stand up, somebody just sets a computer up, so you see their face while they're talking, and everybody else is actually physically there. So how do you protect against favoritism? That's a challenge, and I think as a manager, you have to be fair. And I think you have to get good at essentially being a remote team as a whole, even though like only some of you are remote. we sort of have a challenge like this coming up where our product owner is in Michigan, and we're all in Ohio on the team I'm on now. And, occasionally they can come down, but it's kind of a drive, so that's just not going to be doable. But, like, just talking on the phone isn't enough. But if we were to try to do a screen sharing, and, we're all talking into the speakerphone, it's just not the same as when they're physically there. We're considering next time we have that meeting with her, like, all of us that are going to be in the meeting are going to work from home so that we can all do it and all sort of be on the level playing field of, like, we're all on our own phone with our own computer and our own webcam, and then we can hopefully work through that. How would you convince a team lead who is naturally distrustful of his team members of a necessary relocation and to move permanently remote in a team where no one works remote regularly? I got to read that again. How would you convince a team lead who is naturally distrustful of his team members of a necessary relocation? Yeah, I guess I don't quite understand the question, but I'll answer the part about the team lead who is naturally distrustful. Again, results matter. So, if I assume whoever asked this is sort of the developer and not the team lead, and the developer wants to try this, just ask, like, hey, I got to work on something today. Do you mind if I work from home? And then, like, hopefully it goes well, and then, when you come in the next day, like, or whatever, just talk about it. Be like, hey, man, that really worked well. Like, I got a ton done. If you can show, like, look, I got a ton done, like, managers tend to like that kind of thing. It's sort of their job to make sure things are getting done. So that's music to a manager's ears. So that's why I've always said, like, if working from home helps you get things done faster, you need to take a day to do that, like, go do it. So I'm guessing that maybe, like, that's something you can try, and then if it works well, like, say, well, what if we just try one day working from home? Like, it's just one day. Like, there's really nothing to lose. If this doesn't work, we'll just forget we ever did it and go back to life the other way. What would you say to the majority of Stir Trek sponsors who say we don't do remote work because we're agile? We also do agile. We do sprint planning. We do retros. We do backlog grooming. We have our definition of done. We track work. We collaborate on things. We write automated tests. We do all the same things that every other agile team does. At some point, like, somebody said that agile teams have to be co-located. Well, I think the important part was not that they're all, like, sitting in the same space. The important part is that the communication barriers are lifted. So if you think back to old days of, like, this high cubicle walls and, like, people not talking, like, that was the problem. There was no communication because you had physical walls in your way. And that just, I've worked in those places, that just deters communication. Yes, at home, I have this giant void between me and the other person. And, I have the same tools in the cubicle farm as I do at home. But for some reason at home, like, I don't know, you're just aware of it more. So I would say that you can definitely do agile. There's definitely plenty of remote working teams that are remote working companies that are 100% remote, and they're all doing agile in some form as well. Again, we don't have a physical card wall, but the online tools have gotten so good that it's been a while since I've been on a team that actually had a physical card wall anymore. And back in the day, I loved those things, but the online tools are great, and then no one has to spend hours of time just keeping a board up to date when we have, like, technology. Is working from home beneficial enough that you're going to find a new job now that you're back on an office team? I don't think I can answer that. Maybe you can ask some of the people on my team if they're going to do it. I don't know if they should answer that. That's all right. When they're looking for work, they all tell me anyways. But I will say, though, if I were looking for a job and someone had a remote work offering, that would be a huge plus for me. How do you ensure adequate and proactive communication with the product owner when the development team is off-site? We have this problem. Our product owner's in Michigan, and we all work in Ohio. Thankfully, she's very good at responding to email. I mean, she often responds within, like, 10 minutes when you send her an email, which is not typical for a lot of people. We have her on Slack. I don't think she uses the Slack too much just because the email's been working. We've had to do a lot of phone calls. The emails work well, but, like, sometimes you need clarification, so you just need to talk. We've had her coming down, like, every other week for a day, that's not working very well just because of the drive. So I think we're going to do the screen sharing thing. But, for a lot of people, like the product owners in your building, but they don't sit with you. They're like off on another floor and they have another job. Like, so you do still have that barrier. Now, it is easier because you can just walk up and talk to them. So that's how we've dealt with it. Again, like we're going to try the everybody working from home screen sharing idea. Hopefully that works well. Zoom is a cool video conferencing app too. I would agree with that. We don't use Zoom, but I've been in meetings with Zoom, and every experience I have is great. If Jira feels like overkill, Trello, Clubhouse.ion, good feedback. I've used Trello a lot just for my own personal life. It's also free. Somebody's a QA person in here? How do you successfully onboard a new team member who is 100% remote if the rest of the team does not regularly work from home? How do you ensure they feel welcome and comfortable with their new team? I never actually had to deal with this. I thought I would. It might happen. This happened before I got there. We did have a remote guy join our team. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. At some point, I'm going to figure it out, but I think it's going to be the same thing, just communication. Like, hey, you might be sitting and pairing with somebody all day or for 4 hours a day while you get up to speed. I didn't hire anybody while we were doing the working from home thing. If I did, I probably would have said, like, we're going to, I'm at least me or whoever's onboarding them is going to go in the office for 2 weeks just to, like, help get them going and just be easier. Thank you. This is what happens when you use these tools. I'm going to do this more often. Google Sheets. I've used the meeting Owl Labs as a relatively inexpensive solution to the AV problem for conference rooms. Does anybody has anybody outfitted their conference rooms with video conferencing equipment? What did you use? Do you know?
No idea, but it rarely works the right way.
Okay. Doesn't work?
We use a combination of the Meeting Owl and life-size icon devices.
Life-size icon devices in Meeting Owl?
Yeah, the Meeting Owl is like an $800 little 360 camera thing.
Yeah.
Versus the thousands of dollars that you pay for the,
Yeah. Yeah, like outfitting a conference room with video conferencing equipment is very expensive. But like if you're going to do this, like you may want to do that. There's nothing worse than not having communication and not having that big barrier there. All right. That's it for questions. Moving on. We did have a Slack question. Do your teams track hours? Yes, we do. Do you find that people work the same number of hours, or are they doing more with less? They are working more. I'm being honest. They work more. Questions? We did that. So if you want to learn more, this is a good book, Remote. This is by the company 37 Signals, which is now just called Basecamp. David Hannemeyer Hansen, the creator of Rails. So these guys are pretty well known. Their company has been, I think, from the get-go or very early on, like pretty much 100% remote. Everybody they hire is 100% remote. So they share a lot of stories and just a lot of tips and tricks and things that you need to be aware of. I took a lot of stuff from that book for this talk and just for applying in our own team. The whole intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, purpose thing comes from Daniel Pink's TED Talk on the puzzle of motivation. This is sort of a well-known thing now. But if you haven't watched it, it's a 17-minute TED Talk. I highly recommend it. You'll get the gist of what he's saying. It's based on his book, which is basically the long version of the talk. So I read the book too. I'd recommend it. It's a really good book. Thanks for coming. So if you want the slides, that's where you go to get them. I would love to hear from people that are either working from home or trying it or want to know more. If that's you, please come talk to me. Send me an email. This is my first try at this, so I'd love to hear other people's experiences so we can all learn from each other. So thanks for coming.